Uhuru Sasa, which means freedom now in Kiswahili. You're listening to Diasporic Music with Melinda Francis, Norman Richmond. Lisa Watson is on the buttons, and we're joined on the line by Dr. Gerald Horne, and we're going to give you the Horne Report, and we are going to speak to Dr. Horne. And Dr. Horne's latest volume is The Capital of Slavery, Washington, D.C., 1800 to 1865. And Dr. Horne is the author of about nearly 50 books. And we're going to be talking about a number of issues, burning issues today. And first of all, we wanted to bring on Dr. Horne's theme song and then talk to Dr. Gerald Horne.
Say, man, they tell me you think you're pretty good. Don't you know you in my neighborhood? They tell me you pretty fast on your feet. So I want you to meet me at the dance hall on Market Street. You hear?
You're listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96 with Melinda Francis, Norman Richmond, and we just completed the Jazz Zone, and joining us on the line is Dr. Gerald Horne. Dr. Gerald Horne, the author of a brand new book, The Capital of Slavery, Washington, D.C., 1800 to 1865. And there's going to be a showdown. The showdown is taking place. I guess there's a showdown between the needy against the greedy, wouldn't you say?
Well, I take it you're referring to the impending summit between President Xi Jinping of China and Mr. Trump of Washington, D.C. Speaking of the latter, I should note that much commentary has focused on his personal traits, his authoritarianism and his erratic behavior. But I think it would be wiser for commentators to note how that reflects class forces within U.S. imperialism. That is to say, with regard to the authoritarianism, that reflects the fact that a substantial percentage of settler descendants would like to turn back the clock, perhaps even to the era of Jim Crow, perhaps to the time when, in their minds, they enjoyed untrammeled privilege. And as the saying goes, if you're accustomed to privilege, equality seems like oppression and persecution. The point is, however, that that particular sector of the electorate does not necessarily command a majority, which means that they have to use the iron hand of authoritarianism enter one Donald J. Trump. And with regard to his being erratic, that also reflects class interest because he has to zig and zag, which he does repeatedly, because even the ruling class of the United States is not united behind some of his policies. For example, witness his policy towards Ukraine and Russia, where in August he unfolds and unrolls the red carpet for Mr. Putin in Alaska. Shortly thereafter, he refers to Russia as a paper tiger. Just in the past week or so, he has sought, as we shall discuss in more detail shortly, he has sought to impose bone-crushing sanctions on Russia, not to mention India and China. That's point number one. Point number two is that with regard to the authoritarianism, according to the New York Post, which is a right-wing rag, the Republicans are moving to deport the Kwame Mamdani, the odds-on favorite to become the next mayor of New York City, who was born in Uganda to parents who have roots in India. Supposedly, according to the Republicans, there are miscues in his paperwork, his immigration paperwork, which necessitates his being deported to Uganda. I kid you not. And likewise, given that they're on a roll, they also have in their gun sight Congresswoman Omar of Minnesota, who, as you know, is of Somali ancestry. And this should not come as a surprise to those of us who are familiar with U.S. history. Recall that during the worst excesses of the Red Scare, Claudia Jones, a U.S. communist leader, was ousted from the United States. They did not send her back to Trinidad and Tobago, her homeland, because they thought that she would be too effective there. Instead, they sent her to the then colonial power. But speaking of England, where of course she became a leader of the Black British population, helping to organize the first Caribbean festival, publishing the West Indian Gazette, a leading organ. And with regard to Canada, we have been informed that Prime Minister Carney of Ottawa has been received warmly at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And I think if that is true, it's because many nations see Canada under the gun, being pressured by US imperialism, and therefore perhaps they feel that they can create or foment an ally in Washington, which will hold them in good stead as they confront US imperialism. That is to say that with regard to Mr. Trump pressuring Canada, so speaking to make it the so-called 51st state, I don't think that he contemplated the second and third order consequences. Just like, to turn to another issue, Australia, who sent its prime minister to Washington just last week, they have not begun to contemplate the import of Indonesia, one of their closest neighbors, becoming perhaps the fourth largest economy on planet Earth within the 21st century, nor have they begun to contemplate, and you could say the same thing for the United States for that matter, the rise of India as a great power, which we of course have discussed repeatedly. With that, let me return the microphone to you.
That was Malaysia. There was a report many, many years ago that Margaret Trudeau had linked to Malaysia. I was reading about that today, and they're denying. Some reports say not. It isn't so, but I don't know what to believe anymore in terms of what is fake news. I saw. Let me say this. I saw a clip of Muhammad Ali dancing on Soul Train. Not to say that Ali was couldn't dance, but I just think it looked like AI to me. So you might. I don't know what to believe anymore in terms of just because you see it on even a video of it doesn't. What did Duke Ellington once say? It ain't necessarily so.
Well, that a fortiori helps to underscore the importance of reliable outlets, such as diasporic music, for example, which comes into your home regularly every Sunday afternoon and certainly merits wide support.
Let me before I turn it over to Melinda, I have this is a burning issue. The Cameroon elections, I remember looking at the Cameroons for years and years and years. At one point, the Cameroon was looked like they were going to be the first independent nation, even before Ghana. But they had at least two central committees, maybe three central committees, not the leader or the leadership wiped out, but they had, I know, at least two, maybe three leadership whole central committees wiped out, and that's the UPC, the Union of Peoples of Cameroon. They were socialist, communist party, and right now they've been ruled by a bunch of geriatrics. These guys would make me look like a baby. I mean, well, there's 90, 93, 92. I mean, that's it. The leadership is, these brothers should be, I shouldn't say brothers, but these gentlemen I shouldn't even say gentlemen. These guys should be in retire in their rocking chairs, but they're running governments. Would you talk about that?
Well, you're referring to 92-year-old Paul Biya, who has been in office for decades and is being challenged repeatedly, as we've discussed repeatedly on this program, with regard to the run-up to Cameroonian independence some decades ago. I take it you're referring to such key leaders as Reuben Nyobe, a prominent nationalist who led the Union of the Peoples of Cameroon, UPC, assassinated in 1958. I'm assuming you're referring to Ahmadou Ahidjo, who became the first president of the Republic of Cameroon in 1960. Perhaps you're referring to Felix Roland Moubier, who succeeded Nyobe as the UPC leader before his own assassination, and John Ngu Foncha, who was a leader during the unification of British and French Cameroon, which is under increasing pressure because of perceived discrimination against so-called Anglophones, that is to say, those who speak English as opposed to French. In any case, I would put a personal message to our friends in Philadelphia to put on the record, perhaps ominously and dangerously, I might add, the opinion of the most prominent Cameroonian in the United States. I'm speaking of Joel Embiid, former University of Kansas basketball star, now with the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't want to necessarily put Brother Embiid on the spot, but this is a moment when we need all hands on deck.
There's another professional basketball player from Cameroon that used to be with the Raptors having a senior moment. You know what I'm talking about. What's my brother's name? He's playing with, I think he's with Indiana now.
Oh, Pascal Siakam.
Your phone, you're very, very, very faint, sir.
Pascal Siakam.
Yes, Pascal, yeah, Siakam. He's a Cameroonian too, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, he is. He used to be in Toronto. He was very, very friendly towards the community here in Toronto, right?
And then you might remember Ulrich Tumche, who
yes, sir,
played with the Raptors some years ago.
Right. Yeah, the Cameroon, we really, Mumi from Ilombe Brass always talked about him. They poisoned him, and when they gave him poison, he knew exactly what they had given him, and I think he might have passed away maybe a week later. I think he was somewhere in Switzerland or Sweden somewhere, and he was set up and murdered. Right. And there's a film about him. I saw that film many years ago at Cameron Bailey's film when he ran the Toronto International Film Festival. He brought a film about Felix Mumi here many years ago. Melinda, you have some questions? Go ahead. Cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say, since you're on a roll with regard to the foul deeds of the imperialists, I feel compelled to raise the case of Ben Barka of Morocco.
Yes, sir.
Murdered in Paris in 1965, which was a tremendous setback to the anti-imperialist struggle worldwide.
You know, he's almost forgotten. People don't. We don't talk about him like we talk about Lumumba or or Sankara or people. But the brother from Morocco, he was definitely to the left, wasn't he?
Of course.
I guess I'm going to say this. I'm going to shut up. I guess that's part of the imperialists divide the North Africa from sub-Saharan Africa to keep the skin game alive, wouldn't you say?
Well, in part, and of course, when you weaken the left, you strengthen the rapacious tentacles of global North Atlantic imperialism.
All right, Melinda, you have some questions?
Yeah, I wondered if you wanted to touch on the 50th anniversary of Cuban intervention in Angola.
Well, it's something worth noting, if not celebrating. Recall what happened in the fall of 1975 when Angola, a nation which quite tortuously helped to produce a number of enslaved Africans, not least in the United States of America, was sailing towards independence, but there was a split in the movement. On the one hand, you had the ultimately victorious MPLA, Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola. On the other hand, you had UNITA and the FMLA. Interestingly enough, just as a footnote, the president of Angola, in a gesture towards national unity, has just made outreach to subsequent leaders of both UNITA and the FMLA. Let's hope that that maneuver will not backfire. But in any case, in order to rescue the MPLA, Cuba dispatched thousands of its armed forces by way of Guyana under Forbes Burnham, by the way, to combat a South African apartheid invasion assisted by the US CIA, and I'm afraid to say, assisted also by China. This was heroism at its finest, and it's something that needs to be marked and commemorated. But since I have the microphone, let me divert to another burning question, one of the most burning questions of the contemporary era. I'm speaking of the aforementioned sanctions that have been put on Russian oil in order to deprive Moscow of revenue by which it can help to squash the proxy war now unfolding in Ukraine. This is quite remarkable because the ultimate purchasers of Russian oil are China and India. And in some ways, the North Atlantic powers are throwing the gauntlet down at the feet of New Delhi and Beijing, forcing them into a tighter embrace with Moscow. I don't think this is going to end very well for the North Atlantic powers, not least because Mr. Trump, their titular leader, he has helped to destabilize unity in the North Atlantic camp by, for example, threatening to annex Canada, imposing eye-watering tariffs on the European Union and Britain, for example. And I think that's one of the reasons why you'll see Ottawa trying to cut deals with China, for example, trying to cut deals, of course, with India, despite the fact that India has been accused credibly of assassinations on Canadian soil, not least in British Columbia a few years ago. And so because of this disunity, I don't think that the North Atlantic nations are going to come out of this conflict with Moscow, Beijing, and New Delhi smelling like a rose. In fact, one of the reasons why I made this rather portentous introduction to this point is that we may be living through the medium stages, if not the late stages, of the collapse of North Atlantic hegemony, which commenced approximately 500 years ago, with Spain sponsoring Christopher Columbus, which then gave rise to genocide against the indigenous, enslavement of the Africans. It took a long and bloody trail to get us to this point. But I think we are at this point, and I would like to think that this means good news, particularly for the African American population in North America, the African Canadian population. But let's talk about the US Black population to begin with. That population made a disastrous bargain with the liberals some decades ago, where they detached themselves from global Pan-Africanism. They threw overboard the leaders of the left, including Paul Robeson, seeking to establish their U.S. bona fides, bona fides. And now, of course, with the right wing on the march in the United States, as noted, the Black population not necessarily connected globally or internationally, not in any concrete manner, it leaves this population terribly exposed, which is quite ironic Because as I noted in my book on Southern Africa, in the 1950s, the leaders of the NAACP tried to entice the leaders of the African National Congress to embark on a similar path. That is to say, detaching themselves from the global Pan-African struggle, throwing overboard their comrades in the South African Communist Party, but the ANC under Mandela would not fight. And there you have it.
I don't know if we lost Norman, but where do we want to go now? Do we want to wrap up Odinga dies? Because that's been on deck for a bit.
Well, yes, Raila Odinga, a leader of the struggle in Kenya. Multiple times he tried to become the president. He once served as prime minister. His ethnic background was held against him by many voters. Indeed, when Mr. Obama became president of the United States, it helped to solidify the longtime Kenyan joke that a Luo, which was Mr. Odinga's ethnic group, would become president of the United States before president of Kenya. Of course, Barack Obama Sr. Was Luo, for example. In any case, it's quite striking that Mr. Odinga died in India, in earnest of the close ties between New Delhi and Nairobi. But since I have the microphone once again, let me also mention another earth-shattering event that deserves study. I'm speaking of the arrest this past weekend of the coach of the Portland Trailblazers, that is to say, the indictment, I should say, Chauncey Billups, Hall of Famer, former star guard with the Detroit Pistons. He was accused of working, believe it or not, with organized crime in New York, helping to bring high rollers to illicit poker games where they would be systematically looted and plundered because of cheating. And apparently, according to the indictment at least, Chauncey Billups got a cut from the organized crime families whose interests he was serving. Likewise, there is a parallel scandal whereby Mr. Billups, Terry Rozier, now of the Miami Heat basketball team, has been accused of following in the footsteps of your own Jonte Porter, ousted for life from the NBA, supposedly for consorting with gamblers. That is the accusation with regard to Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones, an erstwhile comrade of LeBron James, the star with the LA Lakers. Supposedly Damon Jones, by the way, a former Flash at the University of Houston, their basketball team. He's accused of leaking Mr. James's injury status to gamblers so that they could profit. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is that the NBA and indeed professional sports have wedded themselves to gambling. I mean, let's face it. And they've made a myth from doing so. And I think that the next scandal, you can already dial it up. That is to say, college sports is now on the path of paying college athletes. And of course, that includes women athletes as well. And there is also rampant betting on college athletics. So you can bet your bottom dollar. Now, I regret having to say this, that already brewing is the indictment, perhaps, of college athletes. This would be a shame, but they are swimming in polluted waters with regard to this marriage between gambling, heavily infested by organized crime, and sports, college and professional. That inevitably creates stains and creates odors too difficult to smell, for example.
You're listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96. I was cut off. I don't know who did that, but I am back. We only have a few minutes left, and would you mind if I ask you, if I go ask you a question? Today is the 114th birthday of Mahalia Jackson, and I'm bringing up Mahalia Jackson because she was the musical lieutenant of Dr. Martin Luther King, and she also was very close to a man by the name of Studs. Boy, I'm having a senior moment. What is Studs? Chicago broadcaster.
Terkel.
He was a left. Terkel. Studs Terkel. I want to get your thoughts on Mahalia and the relationship between her and Studs. And Studs was he was a leftist, and they had a great relationship. And Mahalia, Mahalia went to many countries, and like she was she was Dr. King's musical lieutenant. And I remember, I'm gonna say this, I'll shut up. Of all the reggae musicians, when I started meeting the reggae musicians, all of them from Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, and especially the women, I asked them about their inspiration. And the first person they mentioned was Mahalia Jackson.
Well, certainly, Studs Terkel of Chicago was also a writer, although mostly this is a tip to those in our audience. He would take interviewees and then transcribe the interviewees and turn them into best-selling books, believe it or not. But in any case, he was also a radio broadcaster, and he helped to introduce Mahalia Jackson, the great gospel singer, to a wider audience through his connections to Chicago radio. Mahalia Jackson, of course, born in New Orleans, and was likely the most popular gospel singer of her generation, referring to singers who sang Christian hymns for the most part. I'm also able to say that my late mother, like many of her generation, was a huge fan of Mahalia Jackson. And as you note, she sang at the notorious, the trailblazing March on Washington of 1963 August, which helped to catapult Dr. King himself into greater notoriety and prominence. So I understand why you raised the name of the late Mahalia Jackson.
And I'll say this, and I'll shut up. I remember when I went to Detroit, lived in Detroit. I remember going to the record store and buying Mahalia Jackson and Duke Ellington's album, and those Negroes laughed me out of the place, and I laughed back at them. I just basically say, you guys are taking this revolution a little bit too far for me, because if you can't deal with Mahalia Jackson, I don't know. I'm not going to give up Mahalia. I'm sorry, That was my position. Well, you said your mother was a Mahalia Jackson person, huh?
Oh, undoubtedly. And of course, in the time remaining, let me turn the microphone back over to our comrade in Toronto, speaking of Melinda.
We don't have much time. We don't have much time, and we still have a lot on our thing. Where do we want to go? Did you finish up with the summit with Xi and Trump, or there's also the Ivory Coast election?
Well, let's go there, because as we've noted repeatedly, President Ouattara, the 83-year-old leader of Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, is twisting the Constitution in order to gain, perhaps illicitly, another term as leader of this major cocoa producer of West Africa. He and his comrades have been able to sideline many credible opponents, such as Laurent Gbagbo, who, with the assistance of Paris some years ago, was bundled up at Mr. Ouattara's behest and sent to The Hague to stand trial. But of course, he was able to walk away in the past year or two. And now his spouse, Simone Gbagbo, who of course was arrested at the same time. In fact, you can find the video online when they were both detained. But she is running against Mr. Ouattara, but of course, given his control over the ballot box, we do not expect him to be defeated. And one more point before time expires, my friends in Abidjan, the commercial capital, have confirmed that Mr. Ouattara has a slot in his floor, in his office, that allows him to escape through a tunnel directly to the French embassy. And by the way, of course, he's married to a woman of prominent French ancestry.
Yes, sir. She's a part of the upper crust in French society, right?
That is correct. And obviously, France come full circle, which played a role in the assassination of Ben Barka and Moumier and so many other African patriots, is still up to their dirty work. But it has not escaped my attention that the former President Sarkozy, who was convicted of taking money from the late Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and then orchestrating a NATO attack that led to Mr. Gaddafi's death, he is now serving time in a French prison, and I can't think of a better candidate for that fate.
And I'm going to say this, and we're going to hang up. Many maintain that the French colonialists were I'm not saying this is my position, but many feel that French imperialism was the worst imperialism. Their track record is pretty vicious when they did a number on Africa, France, Asia as well.
Well, we'll save that discussion for another day because I can hear the moans and groans of those who suffered at the hands of the British. But once again, we'll leave that for another day.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much, Dr. Horne.
Good luck to you.
All right. I would like to thank Lisa Watson for keeping us on track, and I would like to thank Bell Canada for cutting me off, or whoever cut me off. And Melinda Francis, you can close us out.
Yeah, I hope all our listeners stay safe, and we'll see everybody in the whirlwind.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.
Power to the people.